What you'll find about this business, it's an apprenticeship business. If you learn and you focus, you have good certain skills, you can pick up a lot of stuff. And if you work in a culture that supports growth and knowledge, they'll train you. And I got trained and I started learning, and it was fascinating.
Hi, everyone. It's Dean.
And it's B. We're here to help you build your commercial real estate network so you can get your foot in the door and design the career of your dreams.
We interview leaders in commercial real estate and hear their stories of failure, triumph, basic survival, and hard-won wisdom.
It's like having coffee with the real estate pro.
You're listening to How I Got My Job.
Dean, we're back for another great How I Got My Job episode.
And very excited about this next guest, Peter Braffman. He is one of the most beloved people I know in the industry. And I know we say that about a lot of folks that come on, but Peter really is. And he's got just an incredible story to tell. And as he will go through, he's worked and helped build up so many emerging businesses and so many diverse managers. So he's seen it from his own story and from a number of other people's story, which is just super cool. So I'll bump it back to you.
We're so excited to have Peter Braffman here. He is the managing director at GCM Grosvenor, where he is the member of the Private Equity, Real Estate, and Infrastructure Investment Committee. He also leads the firm's real estate practice and is responsible for managing investment activities, product development, and growth. He also runs the emerging managing program, as Dean mentioned before.
Yeah.
Dean, I know there's much more. Do you want
Yeah,
to?
no, I think we're excited to go through the story, Peter. I mean, you've sort of grew up, you have the story of being a biology and history major at Rochester, going on to business school and law school at Northwestern. You've been at sort of the name brands of Wall Street, from Kirkland to Goldman Sachs to Zurich to Credit Suisse, and now Grosvenor. So I think people are definitely going to be interested in how you navigated all of those sort of different pivotal points in your life to get you to where you are today.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you. And I want to jump right in. You have such an impressive title at GCM. Tell us what it means to do what you're doing.
Just so people understand what we do, and I'll start there. And then we're a large alternative asset management firm, and that just means we manage money in things other than public stocks and public, bonds. It's all largely privates, which is like private equity, private real estate, infrastructure, or hedge funds, which are also considered alternative asset class. And these asset classes have become very popular and much more meaningful part of institutional capital investing over the past 30 years. Before that, it just didn't really exist in a meaningful way. It was a small part of allocations, and now it's a very big part. So I started this practice, and at the time, the practice was really geared towards what I'd call investing in funds, managed by other teams. And that's great. It's a great practice. But over time, as I grew the capital base along with my team, and we really scaled this practice, we pivoted to focusing on teams that were early stage. We always did that, but focus with them much earlier in their evolution. And these are people that have come from other organizations or want to start new firms and grow those firms. And we became their strategic partner in doing that. So we said, look, we're going to help grow those teams and buy assets and support their teams as they grow and build their businesses.
Why did you find that to be an important feat to take on?
One is just that some of our business, and I mean this broadly speaking in finance, is a business about startups. It really is. And I can't tell you how much. I mean, all the brand names that you see today, the Blackstones and the Starwoods and you name them of the world, the Black Rocks, they were emerging managers when I started in the business. They were small. You can call them emerging managers, but they're small. And our business is all about developing talent, and people spin out and start new firms or leave and start new firms. And so it's important to be part of that. It's important to be a part of that because some of the best returns come from these earlier stage platforms. They have a certain kind of incentives to do these things. They're aligned, they are driven, they're entrepreneurs. But the other piece that was happening, I felt this was really critical, and I wasn't alone in this, is that as more and more of these big firms grew and became bigger, it became harder for new firms to start. And particularly diverse and women-led firms just didn't have the access. So we needed to create a function, a forcing function that allowed us to get capital to these startup teams that we knew were going to deliver great returns, going to find great talent. And the only way to do it is to target that and to be very intentional about it. So that's what we've done.
Bring it in a little bit. What do you do on a day-to-day basis? What does your day look like?
There are three focuses of what I really do on a given day. One, it's just managing the day-to-day activities of my team and just keeping them focused on what we're trying to get accomplished. And that means a lot of just talent development and honestly giving them a sense of responsibility to grow and take initiatives. But specifically what that means is that they are, and what we do on a day-to-day basis is meet tons of teams. We probably take 500 meetings a year. We've seen over 2,000 different business plans since we've started this business. We just see people all the time. And then we are working with them to figure out which teams we want to work with. Many of them are good investors, but to figure out who could build businesses and who we could work with over time. Those are different skills. Some people can be very good business developers, and some people can be very good investors. Pairing them is not so easy. So we find that, and then we have to find the right strategies we're looking at. What we do is we take it, hundreds and hundreds of groups and winnow it down to a handful that we're going to work with in any given year. And over the past, 15 years, we've worked with 47 teams, and every year we'll add another 5. So that's kind of what we do. That's number one. Number two is I'm also have to once you start doing this, you also have to build the business behind you. And again, it's sort of like, that's the forward, but the back is the capital. I have to think about money all the time, not like my money, raising money. So I have to get money from all these different institutions to kind of aggregate around, because on a good year, we're deploying close to $1 billion a year now. If I'm going to do that, and every time we invest with a new team, that requires more capital to follow on with them over time. So if I put $1 billion out this year, 5 years from now, that's going to translate to like $4 billion I'm going to have to put out again. So it's just as a multiplier effect. So I just need to keep raising more and more capital. And the last thing is I'm always sourcing. So I'm on the road all the time. I'm going to conferences. I'm always talking to people. I'm meeting people. And I'm trying to make sure my team's doing the same thing. So hopefully that gives you an idea what I do. And it's funny, I once took my daughter, she's now graduated, she's out of college. But I still remember I took her to the office once when she was a little kid. She was 5 years old. And she watched me. I thought this would be an empowering experience for her. And I think it was. But right at the end of the day, she said, I said, what do you think? Expecting like, oh, Dad, that was great. She's like, you guys just talk. Well, all you do is talk.
I love it. I don't know how you have enough time in the day to do all that and to connect with so many people. But I wanted to pivot for a second and go back to your story, because I think so many of the students that we talk to think that these jobs are unattainable. And they think, look, I don't have family that was in the business. I didn't grow up with that. How would I get to Wall Street? There's no way to do that unless you're plugged in and connected. And, as we talked yesterday, you've got a very different story. You didn't come in sort of knowing the ins and outs of Wall Street. So do you mind giving us a little bit of your background as you started out in the business and were in the same shoes of many of our listeners?
The vast majority of the people I know that I work with, that grew up in the industry, certainly on my team, certainly in my firm, had no background in this, didn't come from families that had any background. Some did, most didn't. And I'm certainly that case. So my family were educators. My dad was a principal of a high school. My mom was a teacher. Both are first generation. Their siblings were born abroad. They came here, and their focus exclusively was education. Parents all grew up in the Depression. And for them, it was a very searing experience. No one had jobs. And any jobs they had were, whatever education they had didn't matter, at the time. My My grandfather was just had like a convenience store, like a bodega. And my other grandfather just, he became a barber. Like that's what they had. That's what they did. That's fine. That's fine. They were proud of what they did, but they made sure their kids went to school and went to college, but they didn't have opportunities, and they didn't have opportunity to go in. They never even thought about finance. They never thought about like business. They just never conceived. That wasn't part of their DNA. So they made sure we went to school and we were going to do great. And all my siblings became doctors. And because I literally had three siblings, they're all doctors. And that was because my father and mother just said, that's the one profession that you always have a job. And they were just so focused on that, And so I was going the same route. And as you mentioned earlier, I went to school as a school upstate New York. It was very focused. It was very tech oriented. University of Rochester. It's great in biology, great in the sciences. So everyone went there for that kind of trade. You're going to go and become a doctor. You're going to become something, go a lawyer, who knows. And my oldest brother went there. So I went there. It was like, that's what we're going to do. And then I just wanted something a little bit different. And then by chance, I met someone who was like on a train. I know it's silly, but it was just opened my eyes to like another world. And we just had this 7-hour conversation because that was the trip of it. And I know it just sounds silly, but it affected me. And so I took my boards for medical school. I got everything in order. And I took a year off and I audited classes in finance. I interned at brokerage firms just to learn what was going on. I didn't like sales or anything like that. That's what I wanted to do, but I wanted to learn. And it was just a completely different language, and it had all these different skills I found fascinating. Lo and behold, I spent a lot of time at the placement office and became friends with them. I would tell my kids this, like, just go to the placement office. And they're like, oh, they don't help. I'm like, they will if you get in front of them and just see them every day. Just go there, do work, whatever. And I remember one day I walked in, she said, I got this weird job. I know you keep talking about options and things like that, because option theory was just getting going. And I found this job on Wall Street. And it was a interesting place. It was fascinating. It was a small boutique firm. And that's really how I got started. And it was very focused in real estate and other real assets. And I really had no idea what I was doing. I need to emphasize that. I didn't understand this stuff. I realized a lot of the other kids were the same. They didn't really know, but they were all smart. We're figuring these things out. We're being trained. And what you'll find about this business, it's an apprenticeship business. If you learn and you focus, and you have good certain skills, you can pick up a lot of stuff. And if you work in a culture that supports growth and knowledge, they'll train you. And I got trained and I started learning, and it was fascinating.
Let me jump in here. First thing, talk to strangers. That's what I learned. You get on the train, you learned a lot. Have conversations. That really was a pivotal moment in your life. So I want to pull that out and really dig into that, just because you're not going to know everyone you need to know in order to learn this type of stuff. And so being open and talking to people is important.
It's huge. I mean, I can't really overemphasize that. So I remember when I came home and I told my parents, I don't think, at least I need to take a little time off and explore something before. That was not a fun conversation. But the one thing my parents both said is, well, if you're really serious about this stuff, they said the same thing that you just said. You're going to need to talk to a lot of people. So I developed a good network of a lot of people to talk to. And I spent time with professors. I spent time with anyone who would talk, so I could try to understand what this was.
The second thing that came out of it was the placement/career office. That's something that students stay clear of. You need to go there. You need to go and you need to meet people there as well, because there are people there waiting to help.
They'll find something. You never know. And I tell my kids this all the time. They always push back. No, I went once. It wasn't helpful. I went twice. They really have nothing for me. You should go twice a week and just go. Hey, anything going on? Any new listings? Any new postings? They'll just, all of a sudden, they'll remember you. They'll say, hey, just check this thing out. And again, our placement office was nothing. I mean, it was a room as big as my room here. It was just this little cramped place. And, but the person there who was so nice, and she just took an interest, and it makes a big difference.
And then the last thing, Peter, is you went against your family. They told you to go to be a doctor. I want to just dig into that because students right now are going through that. So what did that feel like? How were you able to be strong enough to do it? Because some people are not.
I'd like to say that I knew exactly what I was doing. I didn't. I mean, I all I knew is that I was going to be so miserable if I went the route of just going down the medical profession, not because it's a bad profession, it's a beautiful profession, but whatever for me, that wasn't going to work. And I talked to them, I still, my dad was just like, he just couldn't. He's like, no, you have to go continue with school. That was so much a part of it. You have to go become a lawyer or no. Okay. Become a dentist. I was like, I'm not going to become a dentist. Like these are not, but he was such a practical person. And he just said, he's just like, you have to have a job. I spent all this money on your education. Like, this is what you have to do now. And you have to grow up. And those were hard conversations. I developed a plan. I said, look, this is what I'm going to do. I'm getting all this stuff in order. And I am going to be really intentional about it. I'm going to try and get these jobs. If it doesn't work out, Dad, I'm going to go. And Mom, I'm going to go to med school. But let me just try this for a while. And they just saw that how purposeful I was about it. And I was doing all these different things to kind of move forward. I wasn't just like in a room, just like, oh, I know what I'm doing. I was talking. They said, talk to this person. I said, sure. They gave me advice. I listened. And then I got the job and it wound up well. And it wound up going really well. But I decided 4 or 5 years later to go back to school for a MBA and a JD. My dad was like, why are you doing that? You're doing great. You don't need to go back to school. And I love that. That was a very beautiful moment. And, he wasn't being bad.
Peter, on the going back to school, because I think, you had gotten this experience, you were on a track. A lot of our students are trying to figure out whether it's worth it to go back to school. There's a lot of expense in doing it. How do you think students should think about an MBA or a law degree or extra schooling when they're on a track already?
So I don't want to discourage anyone from doing that. And if you're going to do that, again, intentionality and purpose really matters. So if it's like, hey, it's just going to help me, it'll be a good credential, that's not a good reason. If it's, I really want to make a change in what I'm doing and I have a pretty good idea where I want to go, then I think it's actually could be very valuable. But if it's not, I think you'll get lost there. Like I was shocked at when I got to business school was within, when you go back, you've been working for a number of years, you go back to school, you're like, this is going to be great. I'm going to be back in school. I'm going to learn. It's going to be, what? The second week, the recruiters are there. Second week, you have this thing. You're like, wait a minute, I just got here. I want time. You don't have time. So I guess what I just say is you got to be really purposeful. Does the industry require it the way we used to in the past? No, we do not. So a lot of the people that work for me on my team, some of them have MBAs, they've done great. Some of them do not. They're going to do great. Then, I don't, it really depends on the person. So I don't think it's required by any means. For me, it really did. Like, I don't regret it at all. Did I need it? I didn't need it. I think it was kind of cool what I was doing. I could have done this a lot sooner.
I'm interested as you sort of take that career forward, and you look at your trajectory. You went from law school and business school to a law firm, and then you pivoted back towards finance. And I'm sure that you were involved in finance at Kirkland, but there's, as you put it, a lot of intentional acts, it seems like, as you've navigated your career. And all those intentional acts come with real potential downsides, right? I mean, you're on a track and people at a law firm and you decide to leave. A lot of our folks that are sort of graduates of our program are trying to kind of weigh those cost benefit analysis. I think a lot of folks feel just so blessed to be on a track. And if you don't have the family support and you really need the money, is it worthwhile to try to make a change on something that's an unknown? And would love to hear your perspective on that.
I think I started before by saying like what an apprenticeship business this is. I think many careers have an apprenticeship aspect. You learn from people you work with or work for. And that is very true in this business. If you're on a good career path and you have really great mentors, it's worth getting that to its fullest potential. And I think a lot of people leave when they see kind of a roadblock there. I think for me, when I was at my first firm, again, I got very lucky. Like I was thinking about leaving, and then the two people I worked for left the firm to go to a competitive shop, and they were going to try and take the practice with them. And I don't know what the instinct I had was, but whatever it is, I jumped on a plane and went to our clients and just said, and I was like 25 years old, but I looked a little older. So that helped. And I told them only later how old I was. They were like impressed and shocked
scared.
and a little pissed, but a little scared. But I did it, and I just said, "Look, work with me. We're going to get this stuff done." And I wound up inheriting the practice. Wow. I built it up, and it was like the best formative experience I ever had. And so I always tell that to people. Like, I actually believe in turnover at a firm. I think it's actually healthy for firms. I think it's important that people not leave because they have to leave, but find new opportunities, take care of themselves, make room for people below them to come up. Mm-hmm. And when people below, to take advantage of those moments. So I took advantage of a moment, worked out well, and I loved it. But I just realized at some point, like I got kind of ahead of my skis. It was incredible, but I had so many questions, like real questions. Like, I was a bio and history major. I learned accounting on the job. I learned, true finance on the job. So that's what motivated me. Looking back on it, I didn't need to do it, but I really did. Part of me needed to. So that's why I did it. And then same with law. When I got into the law firm, some of the smartest people I've ever worked with were at Kirkland. I mean, they were incredible. But I also realized then, and I did it for the very reason that if I'm not going to try being a lawyer now, it won't work. I want to get more out of the experience. But after a couple of years, I was like, I'm going back to finance. Like, that's where I really want to be. I want to be on that side. And then I went to Goldman. And again, same thing. Goldman was the most well-run organization I've ever experienced. Incredible people, incredible platform. And yet intellectually, compared to what I had at my first job, didn't compare. It was all about sales. It was all about drive. And it's fine. I learned a ton. Loved the people. But I got to the same place where I said, I don't want to be a service provider. So when I was at Kirkland, I was a lawyer for someone else. I was at Goldman. Master of the universe? No, you're always working for somebody else. You're putting someone else's deal together. You're getting on a road to raise capital on the equity side or the credit side. So that's why I left Goldman. And then, so I wanted to go on the principal side of the business, actually be an investor. And I made these changes because I realized I was getting to a point that I was going to get vulnerable. Like I wasn't going to be happy. I was going to be in that place where I was going to be, again, at the whim of the market. And I said, I need to get to a place where I can have better control on my own destiny. And being on the investing side will allow me to do that.
Before we pivot over to B for lessons learned, Peter, I'm just really interested in how you think about your style and your voice developing over time. A lot of folks that didn't grow up with the experience of folks in Wall Street or at these sort of fancy firms, sometimes they feel like they need to mimic somebody else, right? Or not be themselves. And I've always thought, Peter, you had a very unique style. You're very positive. You're a connector across the industry. I've seen you ask sort of some of the best questions I've ever heard in an interview. I think you're a great interviewer. You're very thoughtful about putting together all this detail, but you do it in such a kind manner. How did that come about, and how do you think students should be thinking about that? Because they're balancing trying to learn, how to exist in a different sphere than they were existing before.
I guess there are kind of two ways to approach life. You can be very serious or you can be very pleasant. And I just prefer pleasant. I mean, I find that there are a lot of people that you're right, put on this voice of some, it works for some, but for many it feels a little pretentious, a little whatnot. It's not about partnership, and it's just about like asserting authority. And it works for a lot of people. Like, what am I going to say? It does. And every place I've outlined has those people, and some are wonderful and whatnot. And so I'm not trying to put them down, but there's an edge that I find in life and in business. I don't know what it was, but early, that wasn't going to be me. I just like, that's not how I talk to people. That's not how I relate to people. When I talk, I think about how I'd want to be talked to. Or if I explain something in a way about how I want it explained to me. So whenever I learn something new, or I explain it to myself, like, how would this work? And I try to simplify things. And I try to, as you say, connect, make a connection to this, make a connection to people. We see when people put on a facade that's just not natural. Right. I don't think they're fooling anyone. Right. Like, they certainly don't fool me, and I don't think they fool either of you. And so I just think it's more effective. I also just think partnership is effective. I really just a believer in that the only way out of all the problems in life is to work with other people and find commonality and figure out how to move forward. You don't have to do it the way I do it. Do it whatever is natural to you, what feels right to you. I think there is value in learning the language of any organization or any business that you're in. Like when I was at Goldman or at Kirkland, I saw incredibly impressive people who, sometimes I could be a little folksy. They were not always very folksy. And you know what? They could be very effective. And I was like, I would watch them and be like, well, you know what? That's good. And so you learn from all styles. So whatever works for you is important. The key is, I think, figure out how to effectuate an outcome, how to be, communicate and connect with people, however that's going to work for you, that works. But this is the style that works for me.
And I would just say to that, what's so interesting about the apprenticeship and getting these jobs is you can see how people are very successful at getting from A to B in very different ways. And that's really cool. And then you can see people that you'd like to emulate. And I would say, Peter, when we first met, I mentioned to Greg out there, I'm like, that is somebody, that is really special, and that's somebody that I'd like to emulate. And I think that's really cool. But I think for our students, they may find that in lots of different places. And you kind of pull together a grab bag of different folks that you see, and you try to figure out what's authentic to you.
I'll jump in here because, Peter, as I'm listening to you, and you're so impressive, all I can do is give a shout out to your parents.
Thank you.
Because as first generation people, and that's who I am, I'm thinking about who you became because they crawled so you can run.
Yeah.
They literally crawled so you can run. And so when I think about you and I think about the students who are first generation, we're doing that so our kids can become you. You were comfortable in your skin because you had parents who came and worked really hard and wanted to build something for you so that you can do what you're doing now. So students, keep working hard. This is what generational growth, generational wealth, this is what this looks like if you keep doing what you're doing. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
And let me say one thing, if you don't mind, in that regard. I think about this because I know a lot of students today and young people today, they look at the world and it's not a pleasant place. There's a lot of horrible things happening. They just went through COVID. There's just disruption all over the place. A lot of lack of faith in all sorts of things. And I just say that this is nothing new. And I know that sounds like a bizarre thing to say, and it's new in its own way. It has its own vagaries. But the reason I wanted to bring it up is I think about this with my parents. So they grew up in the Depression. My dad lost, 3 or 4 siblings before he was even born through whatever malnutrition, whatever you want to call it, right? My mom's had to drop out of school because, for a while until she could go back to make money to do whatever it is to get, because my grandfather died, right when my dad wanted to go into college. Went to public college, was great, but he couldn't. He had to get a job right away. All these things happen, right? Then the world fell apart. They went into war. My dad fought, my mom volunteered. Um, all of their siblings did the same. All their cousins did the same. So many people lost. So many relatives from abroad were destroyed. Like all communities were destroyed. Doesn't matter. All peoples. It was a horrible time. They went through the depression, went through that. Then they went through the atomic age, right? They thought they die at the, through atomic, bomb, hide under the desk, whatever it was. And you know what? When we were born, I never heard once one of that. All it was like, life is great. It's going to be okay. Like you work hard, it's going to be okay. They just said, this is the time we have. What are you going to do? You're going to be like, you're going to crumble. Now that move forward. It's okay. So that's my parents. Like they were only optimistic despite living through horrible times.
And you have to remember, they're coming from a country where there was no, like they left the country. So they had no choice. They had to do something, right?
So they had no choice. There was nothing. And they saw a world where hundreds of millions of people were killed like in a short period of time. That's profound. And they still said, yeah, it's okay. We're here now and we're going to do it right.
We're going to keep pushing. I want to take some time and really focus on those students who are about to graduate, right? When we connected, you said a lot about small firms and why those are important. I wanted to talk about GCM and some of the hiring shifts that you made and who you used to hire, name brand firms, and who you're hiring. Like, can we just go into that so that students understand? And then I also wanted to make sure you mentioned about the empowering aspects of when you are interviewing. It's a two-way street. So just touch upon a couple of those things to help the students out.
Right there, which is, I really think it's important. You could, and this is actually a valuable life skill that I think about for my business too, which is I see hundreds of groups every year. It's like drinking from a fire hose, and I can be overwhelmed by that. And also overwhelmed by like, oh, they're all good, blah, blah, blah. I have to have a focus. I have to have a purpose. And I have to say I have to be very intentional about the kinds of things I'm looking for, the goals I'm trying to achieve, and the kinds of groups that I want to be, and help narrow that down. Students should have the same approach when they're looking at firms. Like, yes, they should meet everyone like I do. They should talk to all such groups. They should put their resumes out and send 100 different ones. But at the end of the day, that, they need to be interviewing these places for themselves as well, not just be interviewed. They should be saying, is this a place I want to work at? Is this a firm that's interesting? Let me do as much research as I can about it. Is that the culture I'm looking for? If you take that mindset and you apply it, you'll come across in a very different way. People understand you're very serious, that you've done your work, you think about it, and you will figure out whether or not this is a place for you. So it's not just you being interviewed and just saying, oh, I just hope I get a job. Like, and I will say, practically speaking, your first job, just get a job. That's important. But that said, you need to go in with the mindset of, this is your life. So don't just take anything. Like, at least your mindset should be, I want to find a place that's good for me. So that's number one. In terms of what we're all looking for, when I started, the investment banks were just getting interesting. And actually then the commercial banks, believe it or not, had the best training programs. So that's where people got credit. Some of the best people in the business today who are running these big firms got these, what we call bank training programs. That was a thing that it's all credit training. And then the investment banks became a thing and everyone started plowing in. And now, if you're a sophomore, you need to apply your second semester sophomore year for his summer internship in junior year. And it's just become so crazily competitive, a lot driven by them because they're trying to figure out how to raise talent. And those jobs are great. They're very interesting. You get so much repetition and you get a lot of good skills. So I'd never tell anyone not to do it. But that said, there are a lot of other things in that. And so we start hiring from a lot of other places, to your point. So yes, we've hired from all the big shops, but we hire now more and more from many other places. And we'll hire out of college, and two, when we hire laterals, be consulting firms, financial consulting firms, it would be small boutique banks. Some of the best people I have on the team by far come from these places. They get great skills because they work at these small places where they could really develop a broad set of skills. What I found from some of the banks, and again, I'm not putting it down because they were excellent, like amazing kids, but they were very focused, very narrow thing. They great technical skills. They know a lot about real estate necessarily. They'll be the first to admit it. But they were very smart and they were able to pivot. I'm finding incredible talent from so many different places. And I found that was my own experience too. My own experience is worked at a small firm, had to do everything. And as a result, I was able to take over a practice at a young age because I had to do everything. So I figured out everything. And so it makes a big difference. So I would just say, make a broad search, look at lots of places, these smaller places, more boutique places. It can be an incredible experience and life-changing. And it, eventually it's not just the credentials that matter. In fact, often it's not the credentials. It is who you are and your skill set. And you have to be great. We have kids from Harvard. They're amazing. We have kids from schools that you never heard of. I never heard of them. And now I know them. But you know what? They're great. And these kids are great. We talk to lots of kids from lots of different places. And we engage in organizations like SEO, Twigo, and other organizations that help train particularly disadvantaged or women or minority kids. And so that's great outlets. But we keep a very wide net, and we look at all that stuff. And one thing I noticed is that's like 70% of my team are first gen or women or minorities. And it's like, that was not like, I didn't come up with a number. I wasn't looking for what I was looking for was like this kind of inherent talent and inherent drive. People who just are they know they just are so hungry. They just want to figure something out. They've done the work. They've studied hard. They've made connections. They've done things that I keep saying, how'd you do that? Like one developed a hotel in Africa. I'm like, how?
Wow.
Like he explained it to me and I said, yeah, I still don't get it, but fine. I'm just so lucky he's with me. It's people like that. And again, I believe in community. So if you look at the team, they are as diverse. I mean, it is a interesting group of people from all backgrounds.
And Peter, if you think about it, it's really important for you to be around that because that's the world.
Yes.
Right? That's what the work environment really should look like what the entire world is. And that's what you've created. Yep. So again, kudos to you.
Peter, we sort of always end on one question. Looked like you were going to say something. So
I was going to say one thing. You said something about my voice. One of the things I thought about as we were just saying that is you give a shout out to my parents. Actually, I should have started with them. My voice comes from them. There's no doubt about it.
Peter, you built an amazing team. I can say that. Such amazing people to work with. We'll close it out with a question that we always ask as our closeout question, which is, Peter, if you had to go back in time, right, and you saw yourself as a senior out in Rochester, and you already knew a lot at that point, and you were down a great trajectory. But what would be the one thing you would tell yourself, having learned so much over your career?
Oh my God, that is so unfair. I mean, other than buying
Apple stock. That could be the answer, right?
That's too easy. That's too easy.
Yeah, no, that is way too easy. Okay, this is the one thing I would do. Like, I try, but just be kinder to myself, I suppose, in the sense of like, we all drive ourselves hard. And, we don't always physically take care of ourselves. And thank God I met my wife. She made me a much more, she grounded me. She made sure I was going to and I worked crazy. At a time that I didn't have to. I was there on weekends, all nights, all the time. And part of it I don't regret. I mean, I don't regret in the sense I learned a ton, but physically it took a toll. And I didn't always learn well. Like sometimes it's not about the quantity, it's about the quality of how you learn.
Yeah.
And so that took a physical toll on me. And so I've been just more intentional about it. So I guess the thing for me, I don't regret anything I've done in terms of my job. I don't regret anything, but I guess I wish I had taken a little bit better care of myself, and applied a lesson I learned in college. Like I remember my GPA went like through the roof when I started studying and thinking better. Right? I just said, you know what? It's not about hours, it's about quality. And then it's also about taking care of myself physically. And I dropped that when I started working so hard. And I said, no, I just got to work really hard because I don't understand that. I got to figure this out. I got to figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
I wish I'd taken a little bit more of that's
a good answer.
That's one thing.
So
take care of yourselves, I guess is what I'm saying, people. Take care of yourself. Like
life-work balance.
Balance.
Get that. It's important.
Yeah.
Yes. So, Peter, this was amazing. And I will say that, again, lots of gems were dropped. So we're so grateful to have you on. I like to tell the students that you're not just a podcast person and you'll never hear from them again. This is someone that is a part of the Coffee Connectors program. And if you are interested in meeting Peter and talking to him and grabbing a lunch, and maybe ask him questions that we didn't have a chance to ask, reach out to us and we're happy to connect you. And Peter, thank you so much for allowing us to connect students to you because you're such a breath of information, fresh air, everything. We're excited to connect students to you.
I love it. Look forward to meeting you all. And thank you, really, both of you for having me on. This was great.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you for listening to How I Got My Job, a podcast from Coffee Connectors.
Coffee Connectors helps connect first-gen college students with a whole new level of opportunity in commercial real estate.
To learn more, visit coffeeconnectors.com.
We would love to connect with you.